Not bad. Nation of Fit in 10, welcome to day 25, and we are just going to get right back into your questions. So let's do that. Last video, we talked about the psychology of dieting, a little bit about, how to view it and maybe what's holding you back. And I didn't get through the whole question, so I'm going to read the rest of that question. So here we go. What is psychologically happening to people in general that causes the negative cycle of bad eating, particularly as I have poor coping that leads to binge eating and drinking, or spiraling into having gummy bears and cheesies as dinner instead of actual food when I know these things are not actually good for me? Martine, you want to comment on this? What's causing it?
I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but I think I have poor coping mechanisms as well. So, like anxiety and sadness and even being tired actually trigger me to go into a little bit of that route. But I really find that, when we're talking about pre-planning, it has always helped me control myself so much better, right? I can see how, when I'm angry and I'm going to go through the fridge, I'm like, I'm really hungry, I need to eat now. And then if my food is ready, I will actually have my food. If it's not ready, that's where I'm going to start to make like some poor decisions. And usually poor decisions lead to more poor decisions because it's almost like I already screwed up. Why don't I just let myself go? So I really like the idea of like having everything is already, preset for me in my day at least. And sometimes for 2 or 3 days. Everything is already pre-arranged and entered, and it's not, I can't even use that as an excuse anymore. So, but other things that I have noticed is that when I'm really tired, that will happen as well. So one of the things that happen when I start to think about things I'm not supposed to eat or drink is I actually, have a nap.
Okay, so that's I would say that's a positive coping mechanism.
Yeah, but I'm only doing this now because I understand the reasons why.
Because you understand the reasons why. And what made you figure out that difference? Like, how did you go about it? So you went from, let's say, poor coping mechanisms to better coping mechanisms. So how did you do that?
I think it's trial and error, and it's just thinking about the consequences and the whys and what was happening that day. And I don't really journal. I have done it in the past, but the journal was just reminding me that I had screwed up, so I decided not to do it. So it was just trial and error over the past 20 years, right? And I wake up the next morning, I drank, let's say, a bottle of wine. I'm like, why did you do that? Because you were tired. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense, should have gone to bed. So, and now I'm a little bit smarter about it. And also I remember some really tragic circumstances in my past where I was very, very sad. And, but I was on the plan because I was just, I was going to go for a bodybuilding competition. And I was really actually surprised about how strong I dealt with my emotions because I had something to do. So I had my eyes focused on what's going to happen in the future, not so much about how I felt at the time. And I was able to cruise through that sadness pretty readily. So I will always remember this.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like maybe, and maybe I'm just being maybe a little bit too pragmatic, if that is such a thing, but you just determined that having that short-term fix didn't do anything for you in the long term. In fact, it just made your long term worse.
Even the long term and even the short term, because I feel pretty disgusted with myself. The next day I feel like shit. So even in the short term, like there's literally nothing. Like I get zero positivity from drinking a bottle of wine or eating a cake.
But like in the case of, let's say, having gummy bears or cheesies or cake, I know for me personally that in the moment for me would actually be great. Like I would really enjoy that. I am, most people would probably never guess it, that know me would never guess that I'm a foodie, but I really, really do enjoy it. But I know that it's a very short period of joy or whatever, nihilism or whatever, however you want to term it, for this, afterwards saying, oh, why did I do this? Now I got to deal with it. And, I don't feel good about myself and all these other things that come with it. So it's a very, very again, short-term trade for a long term of kind of agony.
Yeah, and yeah, but I mean, I personally don't even enjoy it, so it's even worse for me. But you know, one thing also that I remember that I've implemented in my life is I removed all the all these things out of my house. All right, and you know this, and but with my partner. Like if like people in my household want to have something sweet or anything of the sort, I have the tendency to ask that we go out for ice cream, for example, so we can all have a little bit and then we're done with it. So I don't bring ice cream in my house. You know, if when you want your cookies, which has happened in the past, you remember this, you would get the cookies and you would eat them and you'd be done with it, because if that stayed in the freezer, it was a guarantee I was going to have it. So
Right.
I just like I stay away from that food, and as I said before, I do not have enough desire for that food when I'm sad that I'm going to take my car, drive, you know, to the store, and then go and buy it. But if it's available, I will have it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, certainly, I've had moments, maybe this is not as extreme, but I've had moments where I'm like, I feel kind of silly saying this, but I guess I'll say it since I've already started saying it. You know, I'm like, well, I could fit in my macros. I could have, you know, some bread and some cheese, and it's like, oh, well, maybe I don't know if I should be having that much fat. Even though I'm accounting for all of this, you know, sometimes I kind of know my limitations on what I can get through in terms of how much fat I can have in a day and carbohydrates. But if I have cheese and let's say bread, I might convince myself, okay, I can have that, I can fit it in, but maybe it might be better if I have, you know,
No.
some broccoli and some potato, and maybe not have that fat source. Keep my fat a bit lower for the day. So anyways, just speaking to the fact of not having these things on hand, sometimes it makes it that much easier to stay on track. And then of course, having the right things, like you'd mentioned in the beginning of this talk, having the right things set up for yourself, it makes it easier. So, okay, let's move on to more questions here. This person writes, eating foods with less fat. I'm hitting my fat numbers well before my carbs and protein.
It makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's more nutritious. I'd like, you know, so you get, you know, like 30 grams of fat for, you know, 150 grams of carbohydrates. It makes a lot of sense. So you just have to be more picky about things. The fact is, food that have fat in it seem to be always more appealing, you know, more delicious, and then you have the tendency to have more.
And fat's so easy to eat. I mean, I love macadamia nuts, for instance.
Oh, let's talk about your omelet this morning.
My omelet. Oh, yeah. Well, what did I have in it?
No, I'm just saying, you know, how fat adds to fat
Oh, yeah.
fat, you know?
Well,
like,
so had an omelet this morning. We had, if I remember correctly, 300 grams of egg white. Okay, so a little over 10 ounces. That's about a cup and a quarter. Had 2 whole eggs, an ounce of cheese, and then we threw in a little bit of ham. And the fat total for that meal was somewhere in the, I think it was 30.
24. Oh.
Was it 24? I thought it was more. Okay, I think it was closer to the, no, you're right, it was 24, 26. All right, mid-20s fat. Not really a lot of cheese. Like, you do an ounce of cheese, it's
1
not a
ounce is
lot.
this
Like, you
much.
don't taste it that much in the omelet. And, I mean, you get something there. And the ham is, you know, again, I mean, it all added something to the omelet. But really, when you're eating that omelet, I mean, the majority of it's egg white, and egg white is completely fatless.
Mm-hmm.
But in that omelet, it's 24 grams of fat, so it doesn't take much to add up. So you've got to be really, really careful with your fat sources. This is why I always say, if you're going to eat your meats, go with the lean meats.
Always.
Go with the leanest meats you can get. And, you know, if you're going to eat eggs, try to stick with things like egg whites and stuff like that. Not that you shouldn't have whole eggs, 'cause whole eggs have a lot of nutrition. So I would have maybe, you know,
Less.
a couple of those a day, but definitely less, unless you're good with just giving up your fat and eating whatever, 5 whole eggs or whatever a day, or 6, or
Yeah, which is another possibility. Yeah.
you could do that. But, you know, again, just make sure that you try to allot a decent amount of protein in each meal. The protein should be your foundation for every meal.
Yeah.
We're at 9:42 already. Let's get the message of the day.
Okay.
Okay, so today's message is a really, really important one, and it's something that you need to remind yourself, I think. And that is that every meal is a short-term investment in how you feel, a midterm investment in how you look, and a long-term investment from your freedom of disease. Everything you eat is a short-term investment in how you feel, a midterm investment in how you look, probably most importantly, we would say a long-term investment in your freedom from disease.
Or health.
Or health, yeah. So be very, very, very conscious of everything you eat. Reward yourself every now and then, but have a certain level of control and ultimately thinking about eating for purpose, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself, for the love of God, give some gratitude, and we'll talk to you in a couple days.